Money matters in the Philippines. And I know what you're thinking, and you're right. Where doesn't money matter? Wherever you are, you're probably gonna need money. So actually, that's kind of just the title of the video, and the other meaning is, as far as how are you going to access your funds in the Philippines, and that's what I'm going to discuss here. So we'll go over several topics. I'll have a few other videos that will cover some of these topics more in depth. I already have a video about credit cards and using credit cards that you get points for. That way you're not just wasting, or you're getting something out of it. But I'm also going to do a video on one of the debit cards I'll recommend that will go more in detail on how and why I use that debit card. But the first thing I want to say is cash. Cash is king. We've heard the term cash is king, and this is even more so true in the Philippines, I feel like, because whereas the Western societies are moving more towards a cashless society, and I have mixed feelings about that, as I'm sure many of you do, but even myself, I find myself not carrying so much cash here in the US. But when you're in the Philippines, it's back, like when I was younger, when I was a kid, people are mostly, there's a lot of businesses that don't accept credit cards, that don't accept debit cards, especially when you're in the province. Even things that you would think, oh, no problem, I can pay with my credit or debit card, like a hotel. Many of the hotels in the province, they're not accepting credit cards. And even places that do accept credit cards, the power's down, the internet's down, their machine is down, so you need to have some cash. So my first recommendation is have cash. Bring cash with you. If you're coming short term, I would say $200 to $300. Probably $300. That gives you enough to operate the first little bit and to have a little bit in reserve. And the way I'd run it is I would exchange about $100 right there in the airport. Unless you have pesos that you could bring with you, if you're coming with other currency, I would, and I'm using dollars because I'm American, so if you're European, euros, whatever you're bringing, exchange equivalent to around $100 in the airport. When you bring cash, I would bring new bills that didn't have an issue, no damage, because otherwise you're going to run into issues exchanging your currency. Generally, they like large bills. That's why I said $100 bills. They don't like small bills. They don't like damaged bills. And if they do exchange smaller bills, you're going to get a even worse exchange rate. So exchange your $100 right there in the airport. That gives you $200 left over. Maybe you exchange another $100 of that down the road at a better exchange rate somewhere outside the airport. I would reserve $100 just to have a little US currency or a little currency in reserve. So that would be the cash. If you're coming for long term, maybe you choose to bring more. I don't think it's absolutely necessary, but maybe you want to bring 1,000 or a little more. You can bring up to 10,000, but I would not bring anywhere approaching that amount. To access your cash or your funds in the US, I'll go over that next. A few other ways that you're going to get your cash without carrying a bunch through the airport. It's just, to me, for safety, for peace of mind, I don't want to carry anywhere near thousands of dollars of cash. I feel comfortable with a few hundred, but much more than that, and I think you're just it's unnecessary risk. So that's the cash. The next, probably easiest and simple way to access your funds will be through a debit card. I use 2 debit cards when I'm in the Philippines. One is the one I actually use, and the other is a backup, and it's good to have redundancy. The 2 I use a Fidelity card, and I use it's called Wise. Wise is, and this is the one I'll do a more in-depth review, so I won't cover all of that. But Wise is kind of a remittance service, but they also have a debit card, and if you're interested in that, and I have reasons, that's my backup, then I'm gonna say I'll put that video out as soon as I can, so be looking for that in the near future. The Fidelity, the reason that's my go-to card is they refund me any debit card fees, any ATM fees I should say, and they don't charge any fees for using ATM outside of their network. Whereas a lot of local banks, I have a local bank, but I really don't use the debit card in the Philippines because they charge me a fee and they're not going to refund me the fees. So every time I use the debit card in the Philippines, it would cost $5 to $10. And that's money I'm not spending, I'm just throwing it away. So I don't want to throw away $10 every time I access my money. So the Fidelity, I use that primarily. The other card is just a backup, and like I said, I'll explain in that video why I use that card as a backup, the advantages of that card and the disadvantages of that card. So that's debit cards. That would be another way you can get cash. Another way to access your funds would be credit cards. I would not suggest using those for cash advances because they charge you, and the amount they charge you for cash advances is ridiculous. So that would not be a way I access cash necessarily. What I use credit cards for, and I did do a video about, I use some credit cards. I'm against credit card debt, but I use the credit card and I pay it off like weekly. So I use the credit card just to save my cash in the places where you can use a credit card. When you go to the mall, you can normally use your credit card. You book an Airbnb, you can use your credit card. Some hotels, you could use your credit card. That's really the main places you're going to use your credit card. 7-Eleven, probably you can use your credit card. Other places, when you're sorry store, or the taxi, you're going to be running on cash a lot. So I use the credit card on the places to make big purchases where I can, just to save the cash that I brought, or the cash I withdrew from the ATM, just to kind of save trips back and forth to the ATM every day. The other reason I would do that, by using the credit card, I'm getting some points. So I get some sort of actually getting a benefit to access that cash, or to access my funds rather than paying for. So credit cards are the other positive thing is fraud protection. You could cancel them if they're stolen. So, the typical reasons you might want to use a credit card. Again, I would avoid going in debt on, you're there for your vacation, whatever. Don't go overboard. Still count that as money you've spent. So that's kind of the main ways, especially if you're just there short term. Those are the main ways I access my cash or funds. One kind of additional way I'll put out there, and this will apply more if you are there long term. When I was there, when when we got married, my wife is a Filipina. When we got married, I stayed there for about 7 months in that time. And later on, I've stayed for, when we processed our visa, I stayed for like 2 to 3, I guess 3 months. So in those extended periods of time, the way we accessed cash was I had her to open a bank account, an ATM and savings account. And the reason I had her open them rather than me, as American, if you open an account, there's a lot of red tape, a lot of hoops to jump through. It has to do with the U.S. wanting any banks to report, so it's a big pain. You generally, in the Philippines, you would need to have an alien, I forget that, alien residency card. I see, I'm drawing a blank. Anyways, you would know, an iCard or whatever the card that is basically showing you are a resident. You would have to have that card to even open a bank account as a foreigner in the Philippines. Then there's all kind of reporting things. So, but if your wife, your girlfriend, a relative has a bank account, another way you could access your cash would be to send money directly to their account. Again, using the Wise remittance service. The reason I use them for remittance is they have offered generally the cheapest, not the cheapest, but they charge a fee, but then their exchange rate is very good. So overall, you wind up getting more pesos for your dollar. Some other companies offer 0 fees, but then their exchange rate is so terrible that that's how they're making their money, is they're not giving you the true exchange rate. Again, I'm going to do a video on Wise. Check that out if you want more, but I use that to send my wife's account money, and then we would just use her ATM card at the branch that we use, so there was no fee to access it. So that was a way that we would access our funds living in a full time or an extended time. So if you're going there for retirement, especially if you're married, your wife could have an account. That would probably be simpler. You could get an account, and that may be something you want. That you would just have to look into the reporting. Even if you're retired, I think there's still some reporting requirements for a U.S. citizen. If you're a citizen of another country, some other countries don't get into your business quite that much. U.S., that's part of they claim it's to track money laundering and terrorism, whatever. They want to know where your money is as a U.S. citizen, regardless. So that's another option, is a local bank account that you could send your money to, whether that's your own bank account, your wife's, or a trusted friend or relative. Although, be careful, as always, when you trust somebody with your money, you better really trust them. So that's probably more for long-term stay. That pretty much covers accessing your money. And like I said, I'm going to do a couple other videos for more in-depth detail on these, probably all of these topics, but especially the Wise debit card. I have to do a video on that. I've already done a video on using credit cards to get points to travel. Check that video out, and I'll get more into detail about how to send yourself money. There's always other options you could do. Western Union, their rates are terrible, but that is an option to send yourself, and maybe a backup option. There's Xoom, there's several other ways you could send yourself money. I definitely think you need multiple ways. That's the reason I bring cash, just to get started and have just a little bit of extra that I hold back, and then withdrawing with my debit card. One thing I will remind everyone, if you're using your debit card, make sure you set up a travel notice or whatever your bank requires, so that your debit card doesn't get shut down. Again, I would have 2 debit cards, one that was a 0 fee, that would return any ATM fees, one that would be a backup, just a backup. And I would advise Wise for that, and I'll give the reasons in this other video. Like I said, use your credit cards where you can without abusing them. Don't finance your vacation because you're robbing from your future, but use them wisely, and I think it's a valuable tool. And then finally, if you're there long term, or maybe even just I would go ahead and set up the Wise account. And even if your wife is already in the U.S., she's a U.S. citizen, if she is, I would not suggest setting up a bank account, because again, you got the reporting requirements. But maybe your wife's family has a bank account. You could put them in, just so you have a third option, or a fourth option, I should say. So those are the main ways I have accessed my funds while in the Philippines. If you have other ways, I would suggest share them in the comments. We can all learn. I'd love to. If you have another way that I'm missing, then drop that in the comments. I can learn from that. The other viewers can learn from that. And yeah, I would just be interested to see how others are accessing their money. If there's a better way, a cheaper way, the best rates. I think we're all trying to squeeze the best bang from our buck. So thanks for watching, and I hope this helped someone out. So just like, comment, subscribe. Everyone says that, but I'm trying to put out some decent content and trying to figure this out. So if you have a suggestion, just put it down there. Thanks. Bye.